Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about problem solving and becoming a problem solver, or more specifically, how to start getting into the broad picture and not get too bogged down into the specifics. So let's get started. To give you a bit of context on this one, I'm gonna have to start at the big, just the other day, one of my viewers came on and basically asked a very good question there. Basically, the person asked how when I learn coding and I study and I read books and so forth, how do I take what's being the specific examples and basically how do I extract the ideas and the thinking and the mindset and so forth from the author's examples, and not focusing too much on the specifics, but rather how do I adopt the ideas and the mindset so that I can apply it in my own practices. And that's an excellent question, because it brings us to a topic that I have been into, basically a concept that I've seen many times before, and that is that you may have heard the term copy-paste coder, or something of a flavor of that thing. And basically what that is that it is when you're going on Stack Overflow, you're going on the internet, you're looking for a solution of some sort. You don't really know what it is that you're solving, you don't know exactly what you're trying to figure out, but you do know that somebody else has probably solved that problem for you, and they're going to have a code snippet or something like that you can basically copy paste and then use in your own code. That's in essence what a copy paste coder does. They simply look for some snippet of code that's going to solve their problem. Now, at the university, my teachers told me, and this is a very valuable lesson, they told me that copy-paste coders are very dangerous because you are not forced to think about the problem. If you copy-paste code, it is a shortcut to solving the issue. There's no learning going on. You're just taking something, an abstraction. It's the same thing. Think about it this way. It's the same thing that you are providing for your users. So because when somebody goes to a web page or use a mobile app, all they know is that, hey, if I click that button, this thing is gonna happen. It's the same thing. It's an abstract thought that doesn't require you to get into you don't get an understanding of what it is that the code is doing, because it's just a drop-in thing that you're putting in place, and then it solves your problem and you don't think about it anymore. And that's a very, very valuable lesson. It's very important that you don't copy-paste code, and because it will make you the worst programmer. Trust me, it will make you a worse programmer. Now, I'm raising my finger and I'm also saying that copy-pasting code is not the same thing as asking for help. If you have if you have a problem and you can't really solve it, it's important to ask for help or go out on the internet and find resources that can help you. I mean, I do it on a daily basis, so does all my colleagues. Even professional coders don't know everything. We rely on other coders to help us out with code examples and snippets. I mean, even when sometimes I will go out on the internet several times a day to figure out something, especially if it's a new language. Trust me, you have no idea how many times I've Googled Scala stuff in the recent months now that I'm working with Scala. So that's one part of the discussion. So don't, for the love of God, copy-paste code. Learn the thing. But now comes the real question. All right, so if we accept that we have to study the problem and basically, how do we get from a point where we look at the specific code and the examples that the author of whatever we're reading have put there, and how do we apply that in our own work? How do we start seeing patterns in solutions so that when we start working, we can actually see the solution ahead of time? We know what we are supposed to we know what approach will work. Well, that's an excellent question, and I'm going to tell you. So if we broad stroke this and we think about it in a more general term, what is it that makes somebody have that imagination, that ability to see the solution to a problem before they start working? What is that? Well, you may define it in many different ways. I personally define it as experience. That's what experience is. Experience is the ability, or rather having enough examples or enough times on to you basically you've been doing something enough so that you already know the pattern to solving this type of issue. You have the experience, if you will, to see that there are factors in the problem that you are solving right now that correlates to things you've already done. And so you know how to fit all these things together. The problem with experience is that you know, that's a very ungrateful thing to say to somebody who's beginning. Like, how do you get good at solving problems and applying these things? And I'm like, experience. Well, that's not very nice. That's, as I said, that's a very unsatisfying answer. So I'll tell you what I do, because that's what's my promise to this subscriber of mine. I promised I will make a video about this, and I promised that I will give you exactly what I do. So here we go. Tutorials. You didn't see that one coming, did you? But let me just hear me out. So the way that I saw a absolutely amazing tech talk a while back. It was actually, I think it was a TED talk actually. This woman had the theory that, or rather she was proving through research and studies that she and her team had done on how people adopt understanding of things, how we learn things, how experience is accumulated the quickest. And they found that looking at examples of things, like studying very hard, reading books and all that stuff, was actually not as effective as just having a lot of examples of how something is done. And this resonated extremely well with me when she basically said that ideally what you would want, if you wanted to teach somebody, let's say the FISBUS algorithm or Hello World or some very basic algorithm, if you wanted to teach people that, if you had hundreds and hundreds of people writing the same code or solving the same problem, every single solution, and that's the way that works in code for the most part, every single solution would be slightly different. It would do the same thing, but it would be a little bit of the person who's solving the problem, their personal touch to things, just slightly different. And if you repeat that, and then basically that's what they found, they showed their students hundreds and hundreds of examples of the same solution, or rather the same problem being solved in different manners. And the students accumulated an understanding, a holistic understanding of the problem, because it's ever so slightly different, and their pattern matching ability or their pattern recognition ability as humans kicked into overdrive, and they started seeing these connections between all these tiny little things in the code. This she did not have to tell me. I've known this since I was a kid, and that's my secret. If you and it's actually why in a previous video I stated that I believe that everybody has something to teach, because I believe that if 5 different people teaches you the same thing, you are going to learn more from that than studying one thing, or rather hearing it from one person, because every person solves problems or teaches things in a slightly different manner. And a good teacher, in my opinion, is the sort of person who understands that if he or she has 3 people in a classroom, they need to speak 3 different languages, because if they just speak to one person, the other 2 are not going to understand them. And that's the secret. At least it's my secret. I watch so many tutorials and I watch tech talks, and over and over and over I look at people solving problems that I already know the solution to, because every time I do that, I practice my pattern recognition. My understanding of how to solve that type of problem becomes even further embedded. That's why I love watching tutorials, watching people solve problems. That's why I'm actually making this channel, because there are too few people who just sit here and basically create code and solve problems and walk through their own thought process. Because if I can just hear people over and over and over talking about how they solved that problem, how they were thinking, if I can do that enough times, my ability to think increases. My pattern matching ability just goes completely ballistic, and I get better and better at solving these holistic problems. Because the thing is that if you see the same problem being solved 100 times, sooner or later very quickly you will realize that your brain is actually being programmed to understanding the problem, not the specifics of the problem, but the more general thing. My favorite example was that a while back I made a video about how to make your own Redux implementation. Now, Redux is just a library, but it's a very good library. It's a very popular library. And the reason why I could figure it out, I have never, swear to God, I have never ever been in the source code of Redux, but I could make my own Redux implementation without actually knowing what the source code was. And I could do that because I watched enough tutorials on how they used Redux and the theory about it until I realized, and basically I built up experience with that sort of problem, and until it finally clicked and I could see the code in my head. That's at least how I do this thing. This is my biggest secret for learning how to understand problems and being a problem solver. Just watch people solve the same problem or very similar problems over and over and over, and your pattern matching ability, or your ability to understand patterns, will go completely ballistic. Hopefully this was useful to you.